So in terms of color, we can get three different categories. One is white wine, second is red wine, third is pink or rose. So white wine means you will get transparent liquid. So you essentially will not have any color. So that's why it's called, although it is not exactly white in color, it is transparent like water, but it will have little yellowish tinge. So white wine is mostly prepared from grape juice, and when you try to prepare wine, instead of using any other fruits or carbohydrate residues like grains. Typically, we use grains for making beer, right? But for wine, we use only grapes. So earlier, people used to use different kind of fruits also. But when you talk about classical wine production, they are mostly rely on grape juice. So you grow the grape in vineyards. So most of the wineries or wine manufacturing units, they will have their own vineyards. So they will have their own, you can say, garden or the land for growing the grapes tree. And you get two different colors for grapes. You can get the green one and also you can get the red one. So the green one is actually to use for production of this white wine, where you get clear or transparent white grape juice, and then you ferment that to produce the wine, and mostly you get about 15 to 18% ethanol. So obviously, compared to beer, where you have less than 10% ethanol concentration, in wine you get much higher ethanol concentration, and depending on the color, you can actually get different names. Now, red wine is actually obtained from the fermentation of the red grapes, and while doing the fermentation, you make sure that the sorry. So in red wine, the skin of the grapes are also kept inside the fermenter for extraction of red color. One pigment called anthocyanin is responsible for giving this red color. So anthocyanin will get liberated to the system if you just keep the red grapes inside the fermenter, and then you have to prolong the fermentation process. So normally for white wine, suppose you are doing the entire process in say 7 days, or maybe 3 to 4 extra days you need to spend for getting this red wine, because anthocyanin will come out from the system or from the red grapes, and it will impart the color. And obviously, along with the color, you will also get different aroma and fragments which are signature compound present in the red grapes. So here we are talking about anthocyanin. Present in the skin. Now, pink or rose wine can be prepared by diluting. So one option is to dilute by mixing red and white wine to get pink wine. Another option is to use a secondary fermentation which will degrade the color of red wine and then will create a little bit of pinkish color. So this is in terms of color. Now you can get dessert wine and table wine. So dessert wine will have little bit of more residual sugar. So taste wise, when you try to differentiate them, will get little bit higher concentration of residual sugar in the dessert wine compared to the table wine. And table wine is mostly also known as dry wine. Now, when you talk about dryness, people will always think about moisture content. But here in wine definition, dry wine means you have very minimal amount of sugar. So if you have higher concentration of sugar, then you call it as sweet wine. Maybe you can have say 15 to 18% residual sugar in the wine. So it will taste a little more sweeter. Whereas dry wine, there you will have less than 3% of residual sugar. In some cases, actually, you'll get absolute dry, almost 0.1 or 0.5% sugar, very small amount of sugar. Now, when you have sugar present in the wine, it will also have issue with spoilage, because if you have higher concentration of sugar, chance of spoilage will be more. When you have less concentration of sugar, you will have longer shelf life. So when you talk about the history of wine making, it is again quite old, means Romans, and actually you can say in a defined history, they say Romans have actually perfected this wine manufacturing process. But again, still they used to have problem with wine spoilage, because during Roman period we didn't get Louis Pasteur. So pasteurization happened when Pasteur actually proposed about the pasteurization process, like you enhance the temperature to above 80 degrees centigrade to kill the bacteria. Then only people actually got really very stable manufacturing process for wine manufacturing. So in earlier age, people used to get a lot of problem of getting spoilage of wine due to presence of different bacteria and also fungi, which can produce acetic acid and other acid, which will decrease the pH and also increase acetic acid concentration. So when we'll discuss about vinegar synthesis, then we'll see the spoilage is also good for getting certain product, because when you have wine, yes, Devpriya. Devpriya, your hands. I don't know whether you have raised your hand. Do you have
Yes,
a
sir.
question?
Yes, sir. Sir, so between sir these white, red, and pink and rose wine, is there any actual taste difference, or are they all
Yes.
because of
No,
difference in amount of anthocyanin?
it will. So mostly white and red can be made dry, like you have very small difference of very small sugar content. Pink or rose wine is mostly considered a desert wine. So mostly you get reasonable amount of sugar present in the pink or rose wine. And quality wise, mixing or blending is not always considered as a good thing. So pink or rose wine is actually, those were very means particular about this taste of wine. They don't consider pink or rose wine is a great product, because it is, they always consider it is one kind of adulteration, because you are mixing two different wine, or maybe you are allowing that wine to get degraded. So pink or rose wine is mostly used as a dessert wine, and also for aesthetic, means if somebody is very particular about aesthetic or look about the particular wine, then they may think of getting for it. But those are actually the you can say very strong about the taste of wine, they may prefer to get dry wine. So white and red both can be both can have the dry version, like where sugar content is less, and you can have sweet wine also, but there you will get higher sugar content. So particularly for white wine, mostly we get table or dry wine, whereas red wine can have the variety. You can have dry, also sweet, or the sugary wine. Okay. Now,
Sir, I had a question.
go ahead.
Sir, when we talk about dessert wine and dry wine, so you mentioned that in dry wine we have very less amount of sugar, and dessert wine is have more sugar, and that's why it is spoiled by bacteria and other things very rapidly. So like this problem we still have, like we can do today pasteurization and pack in tight bottles, and so this should not be a problem nowadays. I was thinking. So if you
Mm,
can elaborate on that.
yeah, I'm coming there also. Not exactly, because though I have mentioned about pasteurization, but traditionally most of the industry, they still prefer to use centrifugation or filtration to remove the organism than raising the temperature. Problem is, when you try to raise the temperature, you will also lose uh, aroma, means different volatile organic component you will lose, and also the condensation reaction can also happen. So different aldehydes, those who are present in the system, they can also create a different kind of ester, and that may change the taste as well as flavor. So essentially pasteurization is good to have complete reduction of organism, but many of the industry, they still prefer to use pasteurization at the initial stage, like when you are just getting the grape juice, raise the temperature a little bit, then also activate the hydrolysis, like when you try to hydrolyze the polymers of sugars. So there you get little bit of advantage because hydrolysis will be favorable at little bit higher temperature. So at the beginning of fermentation or before putting the juice to the fermenter, you can do a very short duration, like you do pasteurization for very short duration and then send it to the fermenter. But wine manufacturing process mostly done in batch mode. The reason is the production of grape is also very season dependent. So you get grape production only a particular season. You don't get grape production throughout the year. So suppose you are getting a window of 3 weeks or 4 weeks time to harvest grapes. You will just run your wineries only for those maybe another 2 3 week extra, because you take the after harvesting the grapes, you process them in the fermenter, and that process may take another 2 to 3 weeks. So essentially you will be running the system or winery only for 3 to 4 months in a year. So wherever they have this winery and the vineyards, like most of the winery, they have their own vineyards, and they also claim that the grapes they get in a specific location, that will also have different kind of constituents, because the fruit or the constituents of fruit will also depends on the kind of soil they're getting, kind of fertilizer they're using, kind of water they're using for growing the plants. So it is also location dependent. And if you check the wine market, almost 80% of wine is produced in Europe, and very small amount is produced in, means you can say less than 5% in Asia and Oceania, like Australia and New Zealand and Asia, and remaining 15% is actually produced in US or US Canada.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, I just had one question. Sir, we are only able to see this wine and 1, 2, 3 listed. Have you written anything apart from that, apart from anthocyanin?
No. I'm just telling you the history, because these are not. It is just like storytelling. So
Yes, sir.
so percentage of production is more in Europe, and France has substantial amount of yeah, market there. And French wine is also quite popular because of its taste and flavor. So Europe, you can say when you talk about the market or the production capacity, 80% is actually grown in almost in Europe, and remaining 20% is shared by, and there also 50%, 15% in US and 5% maybe in Asia and Oceania. Now, when you try to produce this wine, it is nothing but simple fermentation of sugar, mostly hexose sugar to ethanol. So you first extract the juice. So traditional way, first they harvest the wine, like you get the grapes. So after getting the grapes, you wash them, and after washing them, you extract the juice. This extraction is done in different ways. Most of the advanced wineries, they will have mechanical extractor, or in traditional way, when you have very small wineries, there they will use the human paddle based extraction process, where you will have a tub, and literally people can actually, and you may have a platform, wooden platform. Below that you can keep the grapes, and literally people will just stand on the platform and just to smash the grapes to get the juice extracted from there. Maybe in different yeah, Hollywood picture you might have seen this kind of activities. In a small village, whenever you have small wineries, they literally just smash the grapes, and then the juice, whatever they get, that juice they send it for fermentation. So in industry, you will have extraction device. So first you wash them in a rotary perforated drum washer. So you will have all these grapes inside the drum, and you will also have jet spray to just wash them. And after washing, you send it to the crushing unit, mechanical crusher. You will have helical crushing unit. So the mechanical crusher will just crush the grapes, and in some cases they use centrifuge. I will explain why to use centrifuge here. So after getting the juice will actually have mixture of, so it is your, it's called must. So must actually has juice as well as the cover skins. So most of the seeds will actually remove from the system. You have a screening mechanism here, so it will have only the skin and the shredded skin, actually shredded skin as well as the juice, and then you send it to the fermenter. So in between the fermenter, you can have one more device to separate the solid residue. So here you can have centrifuge. And before sending the mass to the fermenter, here also you can raise the temperature, so you can have heat treatment here. So process is very simple. And for harvesting grapes also, they always say that the wine manufacturing process is actually a painful process. Painful process means it started with the wineries, like, sorry, it started with the grape trees. Even these grape plants, they are not given too much of substrate or too much of food for their growth, because most of the winery, they don't want to have very long plant or very tall plant. So they will provide little bit of starvation condition for the plant, and they say that if you starve the plant, then actually get best quality grapes. So the initial process of grape generation is also started with a painful activity, that you starve the plant, to get better grapes. Now you do the harvestation, and harvestation is also done really in a quicker manner, because if you remove the grapes and try to store them, suppose you remove it and then think that okay, after 6 hours or 7 hours or maybe after 10 hours I'll process it, by then it will also spoil the juice you can get from the grapes, because the grape will actually have on the surface will have different bacteria, fungi grown on the surface. So if you don't wash them properly, if you don't process it immediately, you will end up by getting inferior quality product, because the fungi as well as bacteria present in the system, they will try to get incorporated in the entire process. Because when you do the extraction, so in this washing is actually not really very rigorous washing, because if you try to use very high water jet spray, it will actually destroy the grapes. So your intention is not to do that. So you will just do little bit of mild washing to get rid of the visible dirt from the surface, and then you send it to the extraction unit. And here, before washing also, sometimes manually people just try to remove the dry leaves or green leaves from the grape, because while harvesting the grapes, harvestation is actually not done by any machines. It is done by it is done by manual labor. So mostly they just use scissor to cut the grapes from the plant, and then they will put it in a small bucket or basket, and then they will try to remove the leaves from there and then send it to the washing unit, and from there it will go to the extraction unit. And finally the must coming out from the extraction unit will go for heat treatment, or sometimes we go for centrifugation. And also, apart from heat treatment, you have option to supply sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is a well-known antifungal antibacterial agent. So it can suppress the growth of other bacteria and fungi present in the system, because obviously in the skin you will have a lot of bacteria, fungi. So this bacteria, fungi will also go to the liquid. So if you supply substantial amount of sulfur dioxide, then you can get rid of this bacteria, means it will inhibit the bacteria as well as fungi. Now, when you try to use heat treatment or supplying sulfur dioxide or centrifugation, major aim is to protect the grape juice, because grape juice is easily fermentable substrate. So when you centrifuge, essentially you are trying to remove all the solid, and the solid will also get removed. When the solid will get removed, associated bacteria grown on the surface of the solid will also get removed from the liquid. So essentially, when you do centrifugation, you are doing one level of purification. If you raise the temperature, you are again doing pasteurization, essentially to inhibit the growth of bacteria. Same thing is true with SiO2, sulfur dioxide. When you supply sulfur dioxide, it will also reduce the growth of the bacteria or undesired fungi. So in fermenter, mostly people use some yeast, even Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but the strain will have substantial amount of resilience towards high concentration of sulfur dioxide and also ethanol, because your end product will be ethanol and you are trying to get 15 to 18% ethanol. So the kind of Saccharomyces cerevisiae used for beer production, that may not be efficient enough, or that may not be able to survive at this condition, means at 15 to 18% ethanol concentration. So the strain you use, or strain different manufacturers will use. Yes.
I had a question, sir. Like when we are dissolving this, passing this sulfur dioxide with this must, whatever we have got the liquid after centrifugation. So won't this sulfur dioxide will react with water and create acids? Will that not be harmful for whoever will drink that?
So there you need oxidation of sulfur dioxide to get SO3. Then you can add water to get oleum. Here we are talking about SO2. So obviously, if the pH of the liquid is low, you get higher dissolution of sulfur dioxide. If pH of the liquid is high, so acidic pH is favorable for having higher solubility of sulfur dioxide. So in fermenter also, whenever they get the grape juice will have sugar and also different acids, because all fruits has different kind of acids. So if the pH is very low, you need to check the pH and accordingly you have to add sulfur dioxide. So when pH is low, you don't add too much of acid, because low pH itself is actually a killer for the bacteria. So when you have low pH, essentially it will automatically get preserved, because that low pH will not allow the bacteria to grow. So at that condition, you need not to supply too much of sulfur dioxide. You reduce the supply of sulfur dioxide considering the pH of the must. So must is actually your grape juice plus the skin and other residual solid material obtained from the extraction unit or smashing unit. So it is actually one kind of smashing operation, or you are just trying to extract the liquid through this mechanical smashing, and that can be done manually also. In small winery, they use simple manual extraction process, but in large winery, they use this mechanical cell disruption or mechanical crashing. Now, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, when you try to choose the yeast, there also you have to make sure that that yeast is resistant to sulfur dioxide, resistant to high concentration of alcohol. So yeast selection also depends on the final product you want to get. And if you have low alcohol tolerant species present in the must, then in the beginning, at the initial stage, they will try to utilize sugar, because after doing all this treatment, even if you still have some residual fungi or bacteria present in the system, mostly they will not be able to tolerate high concentration of alcohol. So if they can still survive at low concentration of alcohol, that means the initial stage, then they may produce certain impurities, which will essentially, like different aldehyde, different acids, or different higher alcohol, which will essentially spoil the flavor as well as taste of the wine. So to avoid getting that, it is always, I mean, the most of the cases, they will actually try to add little bit of extra sulfur dioxide, which is essentially not going to do much harm. It will also have some significant positive effect, like some fungi, if they are producing H2S. And H2S is a common product you get in this process, because during growth of this grape plants or growing the grapes, essentially they spray sulfur powder just to protect them from different pests. It is actually sulfur powder will work as a pesticide. So it will protect them from different insects as well as other bacteria and fungi. So grapes will get protected when you just spray with sulfur powder. And obviously while washing, substantial amount of sulfur powder will actually get washed away from the system, but still you will have significant amount of sulfur powder, which will again come to the system through this extraction process and centrifugation process, and finally in the fermenter also. So you are doing anaerobic fermentation, because ethanol production is anaerobic fermentation. So when you do this anaerobic fermentation, some sulfate reducing bacteria or some sulfur can also get reduced to H2S, and that can create really very bad smell. So to avoid getting that, when you have presence of SO2 environment, this H2S will get oxidized, and from H2S you will actually end up by getting elemental sulfur, and elemental sulfur will precipitate at the bottom. So essentially this SO2 is not only used for stabilizing the or increasing the shelf life of the mast, it will also be useful to remove H2S or converting H2S to sulfur, so that will not give bad smell or bad taste to the final drink. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. If you can please explain like how this H2S is oxidized.
Oh, so it is simple reaction. So H2S, sorry. Sulfur production and then H2O.
Okay, sir.
So it will try to, SO2 will act as strong oxidant. It will oxidize H2S and produce sulfur precipitate. So this process, wherever you raise the temperature, there also you have issue with the formation of different ester and also problem of change in taste as well as flavor. So most of the industry, they prefer to use H2S, like when you talk about this treatment options. So first option is centrifuge. That's the most safest option because it is a physical separation only. You are not doing any chemical operation here. So just use centrifuge. And then second option is your SO2 treatment, because SO2 treatment is also one kind of chemical treatment, but it is mostly to protect the must from the bacteria or fungi, and also in the further process it will also precipitate H2S. So essentially it will again improve the quality of must. And then the third option, you can say, our third preference would be heat treatment. So most of the industry, they prefer to use the process in their in this particular manner. But heat treatment is also quite important when you talk about red wine manufacturing. So I mentioned this anthocyanin present in the skin get liberated to the liquid when you keep them in the same fermenter for a little bit longer period, 3 to 4 days extra period. So in this particular case, when you have a little bit longer incubation, anthocyanin will come out from the solids and then will go to the liquid. And if you raise the temperature there a little bit, this liberation of anthocyanin will be little bit faster. So you can get faster liberation of anthocyanin and improvement of color if you do little bit of heat treatment. So for red wine manufacturing, heat treatment has some positive benefit when you talk about enhancement of color or liberation of other organic compounds. So this is the way we actually do the initial treatment and then do the fermentation. And in fermentation, as it is exothermic, you need to maintain proper heat extraction system. Like you have either you have to send the mast through a heat exchanger, or you have to use jacketed vessel, jacketed fermenter, and you have to supply cold liquid to extract the heat. And also you have option to do the fermentation at optimum pH. Like if you see the yeast you are using, if the optimum pH is say 30 degree or 37 degree, you have option to do the fermentation at 30 degree or 37 degree centigrade. But traditionally they say when you try to do the fermentation at optimal temperature of the organism you are using, you may not get best quality wine from there. To get best quality wine, they always prefer to do slow fermentation. Slow fermentation means you actually do this fermentation in suboptimal temperature. So instead of raising the temperature to 30 degree, you try to keep the temperature. You start the fermentation at really very low temperature like 7 to 16 degree. So start fermentation at 7 to 16 degree centigrade, and then you try to complete the fermentation at temperature 19 to 20 degree centigrade. So it is definitely suboptimal. Obviously, if the optimal temperature is say 32 or 37 degree, if it is the optimal temperature, definitely it is suboptimal, but people prefer to do at lower temperature because the common observation is that when you do lower temperature fermentation, you need to ferment the liquid for longer period, and you also get more acceptable material from the mast. And also in different system, particularly for red wine, because you are actually putting all the solid also to the fermenter, there in the typically there is a tendency, because during fermentation you will have CO2 production. So CO2 will create gas bubble, and they will try to reduce, because they will get attached to the solid surface, and they will essentially reduce the density, because apparent density of the solid will change and they will start floating on the surface. So there is a problem with red wine manufacturing, that the solids material will try to go up and they will try to float on the surface. So to get them in the liquid system, you have two options. Either you use a liquid recycle stream, which will actually create a shower kind of thing on the top. So high flow rate of this recycled liquid will just push the solid to the reactor, so it will again force them to submerge. So intermittently you spray this liquid, so you are collecting the liquid from the bottom, and the same liquid is actually pumped back to the means you pump back to the system through a spurger or through a sprinkler, and it will actually force the solid to again get submerged in the liquid. Or another option is by using a simple wooden log. So manually you just put some this solid thrasher and then just push them to the liquid, so it will again get submerged. So in red wine fermentation, it is very common. You need to push them back to the system, so they will get substantial amount of time to interact with the liquid, and then we'll get more release of anthocyanin and other organic compounds, which will essentially enhance the taste. And while doing the fermentation, you have option to do it in different ways. Means you can have wooden sidewall of the fermenter, or you can have glass line fermenter. You can have stainless steel fermenter, or you can have a metallic fermenter. But most preferred system is actually either wooden fermenter, like wooden line. You have a wooden lining at the internal section, so inner wall would be lined with some specific wood, or you can have glass lined fermenter, so you will not have any a variation in taste or flavor, because wood, different organic compound will actually get liberated from the wood, and that will increase the or enhance the taste. So in fermenter design, these options are selected, but wherever you don't get the specialized wood, you just go with glass line vessel, because then you will have less variability. And this heat extraction is very, very important, because if you have really very high heat generation, essentially it will spoil the entire system, because at high temperature the associated degradation and other reaction will also happen, and will also lose substantial amount of ethanol. That is also not desired. And it is done in batch process, because as you are not getting the raw material for whole year, the entire continuous operation will actually make the capex, the capital investment, quite significant. So just to avoid getting this high capex for continuous operation, because when you try to have continuous operation, you need to invest significant amount for control system. So to avoid doing that, people actually prefer to do in batch mode. And some industries, they still do it in US as well as in Russia, because in their case they actually extract the grape juice, and after extracting grape juice they concentrate it. So instead of using the grape directly from the vine ear, they just extract, or they procure the concentrate of grape juice, and then they add water to dilute it. So you are actually keeping a reserve of grape juice concentrate, and throughout the year you just dilute with water and then do the fermentation to get the wine. So in such cases, they can actually have continuous operation for entire year. And when you have the fermentation, you have to make sure that this organism you are using, they are reasonably good enough to utilize the fermentable sugar, and also they should withstand high concentration of alcohol, means ethanol. And when you talk about the SO2 supply, most of the cases in the final treatment process also, maybe you end up by getting 10 to 40 ppm of SO2 in final drink or final wine. 10 to 40 ppm of final wine. And when you have freshly prepared mast, when you try to just use SO2 to just deactivate or kill the bacteria, there you can use almost, so SO2 when you try to supply in the for preservation, for preserving the mast, there you can supply at the rate of 200 to 200 ppm. So essentially you are supplying say 200 ppm, and in the final wine you can still get 40 ppm of SO2. And that has also some significant, because the residual amount of SO2 will also work like a preservative agent, because in except dry wine, in the sweet wine you still have a lot of residual sugar. So which that sugar can actually get spoiled by bacteria. So if you have some amount of SO2 present in the system, SO2 present in the system is actually help the wine, or it will actually help protect the wine for longer period, and it will not allow the bacteria or fungi to go there to have secondary fermentation. And in certain cases, when you try to preserve the wine for longer period and you deliberately try to have secondary fermentation, there you try to have lower concentration of SO2, because essentially you are trying to mature the wine by preserving them for say 2 years or more than 2 years. In such cases, you store them at relatively low temperature, so you still get low fermentation, and also you maintain relatively low residual SO2 concentration, because the secondary fermentation done by different bacteria and yeast will essentially remove the other component present in the wine. So one of the key component in the wine, which is actually a spoiling factor, is different acid like tartaric acid, malic acid. So when you try to enhance the taste and also try to get less acidic wine, because many people they have different kind of preference. So people may not like to have too much of acidic wine. So in such cases, you need to take help of secondary fermentation. So one option is to do the fermentation, secondary fermentation in bottle. So they are known as bottle fermented wine. Or you can put the wine, all the wine obtained from the fermenter, to another tank. Essentially, that will also work like a fermenter, but you don't have much sophisticated control in that tank. So you just keep that for longer period, where some bacteria will work on this acid, and the malic acid will get converted to lactic acid, and then further it will get degraded to either alcohol or stay as lactic acid. So malolactic fermentation, maybe in the next class we'll discuss, because it is already 50. So we'll discuss about malolactic fermentation, which is essentially a secondary fermentation to improve taste of wine. And in such cases, you have to mature. So most of the cases when you get fresh wine, like freshly prepared wine, you may not get too much of acid removal through this malolactic fermentation. In such cases, for acid removal, you will use calcium carbonate. So the acid will actually get precipitated with the help of calcium carbonate, or sometimes we also use some adsorbent or some organic like bentonite. Bentonite is one of the inert adsorbent. Bentonite you can use to remove them. It will actually help to remove the contaminants also. Even bentonites can remove trace amount of mercaptans and other aldehyde. So either you can use bentonite or some adsorbent or the calcium carbonate to precipitate this acids, And whenever you have precipitation, then you do a second round of filtration, and then you can use freshly prepared wine. Whereas if you need to have matured wine, like if you need to keep it for longer period, then you deliberately wait for the secondary fermentation. And in secondary fermentation, you make sure that the malolactic fermentation happens where the bacteria, mostly lactobacillus and um, some fungi also, they can do the malolactic fermentation where malic acid will get converted to pyruvic acid, and then pyruvic acid to lactic acid, and similarly lactic acid will get converted to ethanol. Or you can have certain organism which can actually convert directly malic acid to your ethanol, or mostly for removal of tartaric acid, you take help of calcium carbonate, which will get precipitated as calcium tartarate. Any question?
Sir, I had a question. Like you mentioned that like 100 to 200 ppm SOT2 is used for removing this like bacteria. So like, is this amount enough? Can't like bacteria use this for this amount of SO2? Maybe they can use it for other purposes.
No, SO2 is actually not very useful gas for the bacteria. So whenever you have presence of SO2, it will essentially create a, it is used as antiseptic. So when you use SO2, it has antiseptic properties, so it will kill the bacteria. So most of the cases it is either it show bactericidal property or bacteriostatic property. So it will essentially not allow the bacteria to grow. So by either killing or by by inhibiting their growth. So small amount of SO2 is also not very helpful for the bacteria. So you keep this 100 to 200 ppm depending upon the pH of the mast, because the grape you get from different region will have different kind of constituents. So it is not possible to have a fixed concentration of alcohol, sugar, and also fixed concentration of acids in grapes obtained from different region. So they need to check the pH, they need to check the acid content, they need to check the sugar content. Based on that, they can decide how much amount of this SO2 should be added to the system. If they have very low pH, means too many acids in the system, then they may not use too much of SO2, because low pH itself is a preserving condition. So low pH will not allow normal bacteria and fungi to grow.
Yes, sir. And like for wine production, are there other organisms also used, like except this Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or
Okay,
is this the only one?
yeah, sure. So different species are there. Like Saccharomyces cerevisiae is one of the common, but these are all different Latin names. So oviformis, fermentata means different. Maybe I can just write few names. So it will be Saccharomyces oviformis also. FORMIS, Saccharomyces oviformis, Saccharomyces fermentata, Saccharomyces fermentata, Saccharomyces delbrueckii. Means these are all within the same Saccharomyces genus. BRUECK. So different. So only characteristics of this is should be they should tolerate high ethanol concentration, and they should tolerate this SO2 in the system. So then only, and they should be able to utilize the hexose. Mostly they work on hexose. They don't work on pentose. Pichia pastoris is one kind of yeast which can work on pentose. But here, most of the cases, Pichia is not used. So, Saccharomyces, even different other yeast which are not desired, they can also be there in the system, and they can produce different aldehyde we mentioned already. So Pichia group of fungi, their different species can also create issue with formation of different aldehyde. Even similarly, Candidida, some species of Candidida can also create problem. Generally, I don't use too many Latin names because obviously you will not be able to remember them. So mostly Saccharomyces genus, they're popular, and different species of Saccharomyces can be used for fermentation.
Yes, sir. Yes. And also, sir, like except grapes, are there other fruits also are used, or mostly the grapes are used for wine production?
Wine typically they use grapes because that is the you can say conventional fruit we use for manufacture of or production of wine.
Yes, sir. Like somewhere I read wherever sugars are produced from this sugar cane, so there are also like wine mills. So it's like somehow like people use this
But
sugar
obviously,
cane
if you
also.
talk
Yes.
about quality, so in entire this beverage industry, alcoholic beverage industry, taste, flavor, color, they are very important when you talk about quality. You can get wine at a cost of say 6,000 per bottle, and you can get even 6 lakh rupees per bottle also. So that depends on the quality and flavor and the taste. And all wineries and all even this beverage industry, particularly for winemaking, you will have a group of people. Their job is to taste wine. So they are wine taster because it is not done by any other machine. You have option to use LCMS, GCMS, different sophisticated machine to test the composition, but it is traditionally not done. So you have a group of people, they will actually test the wine, and after testing, they will suggest whether it is of inferior quality or superior quality. So their job is just to taste the wine, and they're really and the salary they get, that is really very high, because based on their recommendation only, the company will decide about a specific batch. So in this particular thing in industry, taste, flavor, and color, they are very important.
Yes, sir. Like maybe probably in future we may develop some reporter bacteria and other things, so that they will not have to test.
Could be. Okay, then we'll meet again after Holi.
Sir,
So,
one
huh,
question I had. Sir, can the weightage for the major be reduced by 10 marks and those 10 marks added to the PPTs?
no, no, no.
No, sir. Oh,
No,
okay.
because I have already seen the response. I could have actually accepted the proposal, and when I proposed initially, that time I was expecting a little bit of honesty from the class. But the way people have behaved means that blame you can. I don't know. I don't want to name any individual student, but the way I have seen the response, I have seen the response of the student in the minor exam as well as for the assignment. No point. It's better to keep a little bit higher marks. And also another advantage with the current scenario is that major will be in person. So the
Yes,
way people have cheated in minor, that opportunity they will not get in major.
yes, sir.
So there is no point of doing bargaining there. It is better to have little bit of higher weightage because it will be in person. So if those who have actually prepared and also appearing the exam with good preparation, let them get some extra benefit there.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
So also will be shown the evaluated answer sheets.
If you want, I can just share the responses, because there is no, and those who have actually appeared in the exam in classroom, their answer sheets I have, but other are actually responses in the Google form. So if you want, if anybody wants to see that, I think it is better you just send a mail to the TA, or maybe you can send a mail to me and I'll just forward to the TA.
So
And
also could you release a standard answer key so we could just understand where we went wrong?
sure.
Thank you,
Sir,
sir.
like we have done our minor offline, so can we see our answer scripts and like corrected and
Okay, that
what
is
is the
possible.
margin?
So again, you need to just send a
So
mail.
we can come to your office.
So matching the time will be a little bit difficult. So I may not be available all the time whenever you are looking for me. So it is better you just send me an email and then we'll fix the time.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon. So we'll meet again next week. Next week means I think next Tuesday, I think. Friday is holiday and this Saturday it is not working Saturday or buffer Saturday. So we'll meet again next Tuesday.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy the Holi. Stay safe, because I hope that is the major concern now. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.